Hi beautiful souls, it's Tan here today with another video in our Saturn series talking about 5 tips for each of the Saturn houses and signs, and today we're going to be doing Saturn in the 7th house. So if you haven't watched my first video where I kind of go through the karmic cycles of Saturn in the 7th house, I highly recommend that you watch that first. So links up above in the description box below, so you can get a more comprehensive understanding of what is actually going on with Saturn in the 7th house. And then you can come back and watch this video. So in this video, I'll be giving you 5 tips for if you have Saturn in the 7th house, Saturn in Libra, or maybe Capricorn ruling the 7th house. With regards to how to best navigate and practically work through the Saturn placement, maybe before your Saturn return to sort of prepare for it, during your Saturn return, or after your Saturn return. So the first tip that I have for having Saturn in the 7th house, in Libra or Capricorn ruling the 7th house, is to marry yourself. And I don't mean this literally, of course, but 7th house rules marriage of all kinds. And before we can really know how to marry another person, especially with Saturn in the 7th house, we need to learn to marry ourselves. You are here to be a mastery when it comes to long-term commitments and marriage and relationships in general. And to do that, to have a very, amazing marriage, it requires a marriage of the self first. And so marriage, is comprised of a couple of different factors, some of them being, commitment, of course, making vows and signing a contract. That is marriage. When it comes to making commitments, you can start by possibly making commitments to yourself. So choosing something in life to stick to long term. And this can be a hobby, a career path, a lifestyle choice that doesn't involve other people, that is just for you, that you value, that you can keep up long term. The skills that you will gain from this kind of a long-term commitment is the skill that you'll need in an actual marriage. And it's not an easy skill to master. It requires work. Making vows, if you could make vows to yourself, meaning that first of all you know what it is that you value in life, and you make a vow to yourself that you will live your life according to these values. Knowing what your boundaries are and telling yourself, making a vow to yourself that you will live your life without crossing your own boundaries and without letting other people cross those boundaries. That is really important with regards to marrying yourself. And signing a contract. If you were to break these vows, what's going to happen? Can you, we don't want to be completely, shall we say, inflexible. We want to align our, commitment with the experiences and situations that come into our lives. And if we have to adjust those a little bit, in the contract that you have with yourself, what are you willing to adjust and what are you not going to adjust with regards to your principles and your values? So that is how you marry yourself, guys. It's a fun process. The second tip that I have for Saturn in the 7th house, Saturn in Libra or Capricorn ruling the 7th house, is to do relationship inventory. This means for your past relationships as well as your current existing relationships. With regards to your past relationships, well, first of all, it's a good idea to list out the good things in the relationship. But then you also have to list out the problems that were in those relationships. And this can be romantic relationships most of the time, but it can be relationships with friendships that have ended. Relationships with parents or siblings that you feel are problematic in your life. What are those problems? Can you list out how both them and you have influenced each other and impacted each other into causing this problem to happen? And how could the problem have been solved now that you look back on it? And while you're doing this, it's a good idea to also notice any patterns that are occurring within several relationships. Can you notice a thread that binds them together as an existing pattern? You can ask yourself questions like, do you often end up with the same feelings at the end of the relationship or throughout the relationship? These are the patterns that you should notice. Do these relationships tend to begin and end in a similar way? And when it ends or during the relationship, do you go through a similar emotional wave? Are your family and friends generally concerned about the relationships that you have, and what have they said? Or do they express repeated concerns for the relationships that you've had in your past? With regards to relationships in the present day, what you can do is, what you may find really helpful is to list out how many important relationships do you have in your life right now, and how much percentage of your time and energy are you going to spend on each of these relationships, basically prioritizing the relationships with regards to how much time and energy you're going to be spending in your own life, in your own career, in your own hobbies. And notice and listing out if you've noticed any reoccurring problems or reoccurring emotions and feelings that you've had in the present relationship that you've also had in your past relationships. And if the feelings or the problems are coming back, what can you do right now to stop that pattern, to change the pattern, to solve these problems and issues? So, the third tip that I have for Saturn in the 7th house in Libra, or Capricorn ruling the 7th house, is to cut your cycles of codependency. A lot of the times when you have Saturn in the 7th house, you may be walking on eggshells around your father or fathering figure in your life. That's why you may feel the need to always please him, because maybe if you didn't, then he would act out in a way that maybe was aggressive or maybe shocked you or was unpredictable, so you had to walk on eggshells in order to please him. And maybe a parental figure sort of left you abandoned at some point in your childhood, and you felt that even though you did everything you could to please them, they still left you, but still you have to please them. That's codependency there. Keeping something going, a commitment going, even though it is unhealthy for you, because you need something from that particular person. And of course, when it comes to your parents, it's very obvious, because you need their, you need their money. You need them to spend, you need them to nurture you and give you food and a home and a house to live on. But you don't need that right now as an adult, do you? That's the root of codependency. And if you're not sure whether you are in a codependent relationship or you have codependent behaviors, you can always Google signs of codependency. There's lots of sources out there. And if you do find that, this resonates with you, the thing that you have to realize about codependency is that it can reach a certain point where your boundaries really do get crossed, because sometimes you're willing to step out of what you value and what you feel you are able to take on. You feel you can take on more than you can, and you do that to please somebody else because you don't want them to leave you because of how the relationships with your parents in the past, and then later on you realize that you are hurt, that this person has taken something from you. That is codependency, and there can be some resentments built up there. And so to cut this cycle, first of all, is probably seeing a therapist is a good idea and talking to them about your relationships with your parents in the past. And after that, learning to be independent, meaning that you are able to support yourself financially, materially in life, so therefore you don't need another person to provide you with these things. Taking responsibility for your own life. Being okay with being alone. That's being independent. And then, having an attitude of just live and let live in a relationship, meaning that you will say what you know to be true for yourself and what your boundaries and values are, and if the person doesn't align with that, then you gotta let them go. That is a live and let live attitude. Let them go, let it go. Somebody else will come in. Once you make space for that toxic energy to be gone, you make room for new energy, new people to come into your life. The fourth tip that I have for Saturn in the 7th house, in Libra or Capricorn ruling the 7th house, is to do shadow work. So, you know, the shadow is really a part of us that was not allowed to be expressed when we were younger because of society and parents and family. And the 7th house rules the shadow. So we put those traits in the back of our mind, our unconscious mind, and we leave it there. We never act on it until we meet somebody who has the qualities of our shadow, of our unconscious, and we're drawn to it because we recognize it deeply somewhere within ourselves. But then the more we get into a relationship like this, the more the person brings out what we have as our shadow, the more we can't accept them for it. And, you know, but we still need them for something. We can't accept it, but we still need them. And they may express the darker parts of our shadow if we don't embrace our shadow by ourselves first. Because we're influencing them to show us everything about their shadow. And we stay with it because of the codependency, right? We stay with them even though they're expressing the darkest parts of our shadow to us. We still stay with them, right? A really great way to embrace your shadow, you know, there's a lot of things that you can do, but if you're already watching this video, you're already into astrology, you know about your natal chart, look at your 7th house, study the sign that rules your 7th house, and if you have a co-ruler, another sign that also occupies the 7th house, you can have 2 signs there, study both of those signs, embrace the traits of those 2 signs within yourself, do activities, do practical things to become those 2 signs. And planets as well, if you have planets in there. The fifth tip that I have for Saturn in the 7th house, or Libra or Capricorn ruling the 7th house, is to take yourself out on a beautiful date. Date yourself. You know, besides from really getting to know what you prefer in a relationship when you're dating yourself, this is just a really great way to give yourself some love and attention. So dress up really beautifully just for yourself. Go to a place that you want to go to with a partner, but go there yourself. Eat what you want to eat with a partner, but eat it yourself. Give Venus, so Venus rules the 7th house in Libra, right? So give the Venus to yourself. Give the beauty, the love, the pleasure to yourself. That's really important with Saturn in the 7th house. So, some books that I would recommend for having Saturn here. The first one is The Shadow Dance and the Astrological 7th House by Rebecca Egan. I've purchased this book myself and I have done the activities in the book and I love it because this is a workbook to get you in touch with your shadow. There's a lot of resources with regards to signs on the 7th house, but actual exercises that ask you questions about your relationships and your relationships with your family, and it's a great book. Another book is High Vibrational Beauty. This one's a little bit of a different approach. This one is more about incorporating beauty into your everyday life. And if you can make a commitment to doing some of the rituals and, you know, activities within this book, you will be giving yourself so much beauty and so much love. And, you know, I think that that's really important with Saturn here in 7th house. Movies that you may want to watch that is going to, I feel, you know, Saturn in the 7th house people may really be interested in. First is this series called Big Little Lies, starring Nicole Kidman and directed and written by Nicole Kidman as well. In this movie, you really see the themes of codependency really being played out, with Nicole Kidman herself being the codependent wife. So if you could study this movie, I think there's a great lesson to be learned here. Another movie is The Separation. It was released in 2011. It's an Iranian movie set in Tehran about a husband and wife, wherein the wife asks for a divorce. So this is the opposite. This is when the wife is wanting to be independent from the husband. And you know, Saturn in the 7th house has a reputation for possibility of a divorce if you get married before your Saturn return, all that stuff, but that doesn't have to be the case. If you know what the reality of a marriage is, and I think that this movie really shows you the reality of a marriage and the reality of divorce, how life gets intertwined with marriage, and that marriage is life. That when you get married, movies and things, they really put it into our minds that when you get married to someone, it's the two of you falling in love and in union with one another. Not really. With Saturn in the 7th house, you're going to know this more than anybody else, that marriage is a contract. You're putting your life together with another person's life. You're not intertwined together, but your lives are intertwined together. So I think that this movie, I really love this movie. I've watched it myself, and I think it's gonna, really bring in a lot of interesting lessons for Saturn in the 7th house people out there. So guys, those are my tips for having Saturn in the 7th house. If you have this placement and you have tried out any of these things, do comment below and let us know what your experiences have been. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you haven't. If you already subscribed, thank you very much for coming along. I do birth chart readings, synastry, and relationship readings. All the information is on my website. You can check that out. And yeah, I'll be back with another video on this channel, guys. Have a beautiful day, beautiful souls. Bye.